Welcome back to the platform, and our first guest and speaker this morning is no other than Mr. Atedo Peterside. Sir, you're welcome to the platform this morning.
Good morning. Hope you can hear me well. Happy anniversary.
Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Atedo Peterside is an investment banker, an economist, and an outstanding entrepreneur. He's the founder of Stanbic IBTC Bank, ANAP Business Jets Limited, that's ANAP Jets, and the Atedo N.A. Peterside Foundation, the ANAP Foundation, which he founded to promote good governance. His educational experience is wide and varied, and includes being owner-president management program at the Harvard Business School. He has served on the board of several notable organizations such as Flour Mills Nigeria, Standard Bank Group Limited, Standard Bank South Africa, and Unilever PLC, to mention a few. He was also the chairman of the committee that first crafted a code of corporate governance for public companies in Nigeria, and previously served on Nigerian Economic Management team under two presidents of Nigeria. He's currently the private sector alternate chairman for the Nigerian Industrial and Competitiveness Advisory Council. All right, so this morning we'll ask Mr. Atedo our first question, which is, the first question I will take is, despite the billions of profits declared by banks, Nigerian banks, access to finance by majority of the population remains very low. What do you think Nigeria needs to do to deepen financial inclusion and ensure access to finance by a critical mass of the population?
Yes, I think that first of all, we have to make sure that all the funds, at least a large percentage of the funds that banks have available and other financial institutions are actually available for lending. Because if you look at the balance sheets of these banks, they have huge sums of funds. But please believe me, a huge percentage of those funds are actually locked up in Central Bank of Nigeria. Those are the types of challenges that we have to solve. But more importantly, even the funds that the banks have available to lend, I think we have to progressively, as a country, make it easier and enable freer access, in the sense that what should qualify people for credit should be the quality of the ideas and the quality of the projects they want to go into, and less a function of just how much collateral they have to offer. But that is a long-term project. It's something that various countries struggle with. So we have to continue that same path in Nigeria and make sure that we progressively open up. But we're not going to do so by keeping the lion's share of the funds that are available for lending locked up in the central bank.
All right, sir. The next one we'll ask is, Nigeria has used the pension reforms of 2004 to generate a savings pool of over 10 trillion naira. However, there's a school of thought that believes we are not utilizing these funds to unlock other sectors of the economy that needs funding. What are your thoughts on this?
You see, people talk about these pension funds and they look at the size of the pension fund, but please let's first start by understanding who owns the funds. Those funds belong to Nigerian workers. It is the money that is saved up during their working life that will sustain them after they stop working when they retire. So the number one rule that should guide how those funds are invested should be to get a good return for the owners of the money. That is what the pension fund administrators were chosen to do. So when you take your pensions and you choose a particular PFA, you are trusting him to get the best return for you. Now, people talk about the pension funds as if government should now come and direct the PFA to go and invest it in this, invest it in that. What if those things don't have a very good return, one, or two, indeed, they are very risky? Is it correct to go and risk somebody's life savings in some venture because somebody argues that Nigeria needs the activity? I think even if Nigeria wants to insist that a large chunk of those pension funds go into a particular activity, then Nigeria must de-risk that activity. So which means that somebody must take the risk away from the pensioner. You cannot take a 90-year-old man or woman's pensions to go and gamble in some activity because Nigeria decides that that's a priority. The funds belong to the owner, the pensioner. And so all PFAs all over the world, their first loyalty is to the owner of the funds. It doesn't matter how large the funds are. Those funds were collected, aggregated, and by law, it meant to be invested to get the best return for the owner. So what you must do as a country is that if you want the lion's share of those funds to go into a particular activity, then make sure the returns available to the PFA in that activity are good, and secondly, try and de-risk it, eliminate the risks. I'll give you just one example: infrastructure. We need infrastructure. But infrastructure projects in Nigeria are the most dangerous to go into because our legal system is defective almost. It's dysfunctional. If you remember, somebody, the day after a bridge was built in Lekki, a toll bridge, somebody went to court and stopped them from receiving tolls. Can you imagine if pensioners' funds were used to build the bridge and the return was meant to be the tolls, and the judge would just come and give an injunction stopping the inflow of cash? So the point I'm making is that we have to get serious about all these things. There are no shortcuts. You've got to make sure that the activities you favor offer a good return to the pensioners, and also that they are de-risked. So de-risk means that you can guarantee the activity. If you want pension fund money to go into Fort Mainland Bridge, then can Lagos State government or federal government or somebody please provide a guarantee? If you provide the right guarantees, the PFA will give you all the money.
The next one is harnessing the human capital of Nigeria. You have been reputed as an entrepreneur that has consistently supported the youth and women in your organizations at a time when it was not even a topic for discussion in Nigeria. Do you have a deliberate philosophy or policy about that? And how can Nigeria as a whole harness the capacity of its youth and total population to drive growth and development?
Okay, I think Nigeria is making a big mistake. We are not harnessing the full potential of our youths, and that is a crime almost. I mean, I'll just give one example, close to you, Pastor. The person that contacted me to come on this program, somebody called Obinaya. Where did I know him from? I started IBTC in my early 30s. It was a merit-driven organization. Obinaya, at age 20, walked in off the streets and applied for a job. He went through like a test, examinations on merit, scored highly, was interviewed, scored highly, so he got the job on merit. So a total stranger called Obinaya could find his way into a company where I was a bank, where I was the largest single shareholder. I didn't know him from Adam. He wasn't the only person. There were hundreds like that. Let's fast forward today. Government-owned organizations, and I will name them: NNPC, Central Bank, all the ones that everybody wants to get into. I put it to you that for a variety of reasons through the years, we've made it almost impossible for an Obinaya at age 20 to walk in off the streets and get a job in NNPC or CBN on merit. We've got to change that. To an extent, we must create opportunities for youth. It shouldn't be only IBTC that will give Obinaya a chance in this world. It should have the right to compete for every other position. Now, the society as a whole appears to have been rigged against the youth. When some of us were younger, it wasn't as bad as this. What has happened is that I think the same elite in their 60s, 70s, 80s, when they were 30s and in their 30s and 40s, they were in charge of everything. They were ministers, they were commissioners, they were governors. As they got older, they did not hand over to those younger ones coming after them, like some of us did in the private sector. Why would I now in my 60s be struggling to run IBTs when the people that I trained 20 years ago who should be in charge now? So these people who, with all due respect, some of them were not very good the way they could retain their relevance was to tilt the basis of success along in a manner that you get most things in Nigeria today through influence. In an influence-driven equation, the people who succeed are not necessarily the best, but those who have the best connections. So therefore, we have to, for our youth to prosper, we have to level the playing field so they can compete and take part. If you close all the avenues one by one, and you need to know somebody to achieve the smallest thing, then what you are doing actually is that the bulk of the youth are being somewhat disenfranchised. And when they are completely disenfranchised in some parts of the country that are poorer and hungry, then they become ideal for somebody to come and gather them and use them for something illegal, like banditry, terrorism and so on. So we have to, as a nation, address that problem and make sure that we get the best of our youth. And my last message to the youth also is that, for goodness sake, you also have to claim your rights. I give you one last example. Yes, I was the youngest bank entrepreneur. I was 33. People who are there now are still alive today. If I went to a central bank meeting of bank CEOs, people will tell you that 9 times out of 10 I was the most vocal. So if you're a youth and you get into a room, don't get in there and hide. Get in there and claim your rights. The elderly people will never hand it over to you. Very few will. The bulk of them, you've got to organize yourself and push them out. You've got to take charge of your own country. I admit that the odds are stacked against you. The rules are, to take part in an election today, people tell you you must be close to the IG, but be close to the army, close to that. It's difficult for somebody who's 30 to be close to all those powers that be. So we, the rest of us, have to reform the country and make it possible that the democracy that we fought for and so on, if properly practiced, the youth can succeed in that democracy.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. Over the last 30 years, you have been at the front of the church with results-oriented activism. In the 90s, you were one of the conveners of Concerned Professional Group, and more recently, you have formed the ANAP, that's ANAP Foundation think tank. What level of impact do you believe this activism has achieved? And although the circumstances may be different, how would you advise young professionals to go about the same result-oriented activism in Nigeria?
In this area, I think the youth have an advantage over some of us. At the height of my activism, we were taking on the military. There was no military government that I did not write articles against when we were doing something wrong. So much so that people said it was risky. Today, it's a lot easier to communicate, to write articles, to influence people and so on. Social media is available. It's easier to get heard. So the point I'm making is that my generation, about the only thing we delivered through our activism was democracy. And I say that with due sense of responsibility, that the military, even those who are alive today, know that many of us worked very hard, ridiculed them, made them feel they were unwanted, made them feel they had expired, they had passed their usefulness. So when eventually General Abubakar came into government, I praise him for handing over in 11 months. But please, if there was not a movement that made every decent soldier realize that we are tired of them and they must get out, perhaps he wouldn't have left in 11 months. So the point I'm making is that activism for my generation only delivered democracy. Today, that democracy that was delivered is in danger. It's in danger because we decide if and when we want to have free and fair elections. It shouldn't be only free and fair elections in Edo. It must be free and fair elections everywhere. You cannot have one set of rules for Edo and a different set for Kano or Kogi or somewhere else. So be it INEC, be it the federal government, be it the IG of police, be it the army, we should put pressure on all these people that democracy that we fought so hard for, they must not tamper with it or destroy it. By the easiest way to destroy democracy is to have sham elections where rogues, who did not win fairly assume office. That is not the democracy we fought for. And that is the same democracy, the correct one that the youths of today must fight for. So for me, the activism they have to focus on today is to claim their rights in terms of free and fair election. Without free and fair election, young people cannot really participate politically because they don't have the tools. They cannot be the best riggers. The best riggers are those with the most money and with the most clout, who will be elderly people. So we have to dismantle all that so that it is those with the best ideas who win the elections. So some of us are hopeful that hopefully whatever happened in Edo State should be the beginning. We have to demand it going forward. So that activism must be carried by the youth.
Thank you so much. All right. I'll take a final question. There's a lot of talk about 2050 committee, of which you co-chair, but how do you get people to focus on a 30-year agenda when there's concern primarily with surviving just the next year?
That is an excellent question and a fair one. But let me just say something that almost every country, there are people who are charged with the responsibility of looking ahead, planning ahead. So it's nothing different. What is the opposite? We run Nigeria every year with nobody being charged with the responsibility. Just because we have an agenda 2050 does not mean that we have therefore made plans for 2050. It means that we have at least acknowledged that it's important that a segment, some chosen people, should begin to plan for our future. And I will quote Bill Gates here. You know, I think it was Bill Gates who said that most human beings overestimate what they can do in 1 year, but they generally underestimate what they can achieve in 10 years. So I imagine if they underestimate what they can do in 10 years, they will equally underestimate what they can achieve in 20 or 30 years. Now, the important thing is that if you don't look ahead and define that by 2050, we want to be at a particular position and this is the direction we want to go. When you define that direction and your destination, then your medium-term plan for the next 5 years should be the first few steps towards that direction. If you don't plan at all, then as the saying goes, if you don't plan, then you are planned to fail. The alternative of planning is not, failing to plan isn't an alternative. Because as soon as you have no plans at all, you are going to find that even in the daily execution, people are pulling in different directions. There's no known destination, there's no known direction. So that agenda setting is important. It defines a destination. It defines a future that we all buy into. And then if we agree on that, we can start trying to figure out, we know where we are today, which is far away from that preferred destination. We can then start talking about how to get there. How to get there is the combination of the medium-term plans and the annual activities of government and various actors, including the private sector. So for me, let me just confirm that for people who are cynical, just because Vision 2010 didn't achieve its objectives, Vision 2020 came and went, does not mean that we should not therefore think about the future of our country and our youths and plan for our grandchildren. In fact, that's the more reason. It's because the other two did not transform Nigeria. It's the more reason why you must try again. Because to fail to try again is to almost sacrifice our children and grandchildren. Well, we know that the bulk of the failure in the country today is not theirs. It is ours, the older ones. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Atedo Peterside. Thank you very much. That was very enlightening. I want to thank Mr. Atedo Peterside for that great session.